Alright, so these are a review of the new E&All AK series AEGs. This particular model is the AK-104, but they're all pretty much the same. The differences are mostly aesthetic, the length of the barrel and the stocks and the hand grips are different, and the front sights. So all of these AKs, E&All AKs, are made of completely out of steel. Only plastic parts are the front grips and the pistol grip and the stock, and they are also a high quality plastic. They are nylon, glass fiber reinforced nylon, and unlike in some CYMA AKs or D-Boys AKs, they have some cast zinc or aluminum parts, but this one actually all the parts that you see here are all made of steel. Here I have a magnet, a neodymium magnet that I can use to demonstrate all the steel parts here. Start off the flash hider, cleaning rod, barrel, gas tube, front side, everything here is steel. And then the front part of the receiver. This part is usually aluminum or zinc in some cheaper AKs. Then the rear sight, then the top cover and the receiver obviously, then the side rail, basically everything here. Even the trigger is steel. It is usually cast zinc in most AEGs. The motor is a neodymium magnet motor, so everything here is steel. And the butt plate too. So let's now go through the gun with a bit more detail. So we have the stock here, the steel end plate, nice and thick steel. As you can see here, it's much more thicker than that you see in the cheaper AKs like the CYMA. Then the stock release button, or this actually opens the stock. It doesn't cause the stock to fall, it's just for the opening. And you have this door that you can store whatever you want. I guess you could wire the gun to the stock and use a small LiPo battery in here, but the stock setup is to use a stick type LiPo in here. So here's the actual stock button here. This rope here doesn't come stock, it's just the owner's little modification. I don't know what's the purpose, but stock stays really nice and solid. And by pressing here, it opens up and closes nicely. There's absolutely no wobble here, or maybe just a tiny bit, but it's barely noticeable. So very nice. Then the pistol grip is nice and thin. It's a bit like in the VFC, like in the cheaper AKs like the CYMAs. They have slightly wider grips. They have more space around the motor. This one feels a lot more solid in the hand than in the cheaper ones. Then we have the selector switch. One complaint here: this screw comes loose a little bit too easily. I think you have to make it tight. You can use Loctite or something else. Not a biggie, but just one thing to note. Then we have the bolt, nice full travel bolt, and really cool sounds too. In my opinion, the best sounding bolt in an airsoft AK I've seen. and that's quite good considering that it's still kind of bolt that is just on the side here. It's not like a full-size bolt like in the CYMA RPK. Then we have the gearbox here, the hop-up unit and the 25 amperage fuse. And from the looks it seems to be 18 gauge wiring. This Dean's connector doesn't come stock. It came with a Tamiya connector, and the owners said that the connector had one of the wires wasn't on. It was came loose, but not a biggie. It was an easy fix, but the owner wanted to have a Dean's connector, so he installed that right away. Then one cool thing I noted that the receiver is made of sheet steel, stamped steel, and the thickness of the steel is thicker than in the CYMA AKs. Actually measured, I can demonstrate here. I have a caliper. Wait a minute. Depending on where I measure, here it says 1.7 millimeters, but no, wait, let's measure from this side instead. It's 1.5 basically. 1.5 millimeters, and then I took a compare. Here's my CYMA RPK. Measured from the same spot. This one is just 1 millimeter. So that's 12 points to the ENL AK. The top cover is really tight fit. Nothing too special here. It's just like any other top cover really. Other than that, it's dimensioned so that it's rather tight on the rear end. The button doesn't want to come up too easily. It takes some effort here to make it close sometimes. There we go. So the top cover doesn't move pretty much at all. It's really nice. Then coming to the front, we have our rear sight made of steel, adjustable really nicely, and there's a very little sideways movement on this side too, so that's really good. Usually these AKs have some sideways movement, but this is really solid, and the spring is really nice and strong, so this is not gonna fall off like in the cheaper AKs they often do. Then the front part here, very standard looking hand grips, nothing too special, easy takedown. Everything is covered in some factory oil, and by using this lever here you can take off the lower part too, but I'm not gonna show that now. Everything fits nice and tight. There is some wobble in the hand grips, but nothing too serious. Then we have the flash hider. It has the bigger threading, so it doesn't have the 40mm standard threading that you have in most AEGs, or at least what I'm aware of. The it could have the 40mm threading under these threads. Let me check. No, I don't think so there is. Just a big threading like this. Yeah, it doesn't seem like there is any smaller threads hiding down there. That's not a biggie because, well, no one wants to put a silencer on an AK anyways. Or at least I hope so. And there is not a whole lot to complain here. Everything looks really nice, finished appropriately, not like some cheap ass spray paint that is actually oxidized, black oxidized, and no stupid shortcuts. Here I noticed that the side rail is not totally milled out of steel. I looked it closely and it has some mold lines, so it's pressure injection molded steel, and then the top is finished with a mill to give it a little bit, to give it a little better look. And some other parts are cast steel too. You can see the mold line there. It's not an issue. It's really nice quality steel. So if you have watched the torture test video by Gunfire, they demonstrate quite well that the steel is not brittle here, even when it's cast. Same thing with the bolt, it's also cast steel. One complaint really is what I have found is this pin here in front of the charging handle. It is a fake pin, unlike in the CYMA and other VFC style AKs. This pin is part of the takedown of the gun, but this is just for looks. So that's maybe the biggest bad thing that I have found from the gun, at least external wise. That's not a huge deal, obviously, because the gun is really solid, so it has a really good construction. So it's just a little thing to note. But so the gun takes down a little different from a VFC. You have to take down the side, and then there is, like, I believe 2 or 1 Allen's set screws that tighten the other barrel to the receiver assembly. But as I said, the gun is really solid, so the pin doesn't have any actual issue causing here. So it's just, you know, it could look a little better. And that's about it external wise. The video will continue when I get this gun opened. And so until then. Now just a quick look on the internals before I pop this thing open. So here's the gearbox. We have 7mm ball bearings and then steel bushings on the sector gear. And then we have a ported cylinder, brass. Maybe the hole could be a little bit more on the rear, but it's alright. Then we have some reinforcement in the cylinder corners. That's really nice, although it's not too necessary on a version 3 gearbox, but it's pretty cool. Then we have a neodymium magnet motor. It says ENL high torque ELM 170. I noticed that the motor cage has some wobble on the gearbox shell, so that's not a too good thing, but not a huge issue. Then I can see from the hole here that the piston is actually sitting off its rails, or then it's some really weird design. No, the piston has only one rail. That's interesting. I will see it more closely when I open this gearbox, but so yeah, nothing too amazing here. Then we have the stock barrel, brass. There's the crowning. I'm not sure what's the diameter of the barrel. I guess something like 6.1. I mean 6.1. I mean not 6.01 but 6.1, something like that. The stock barrels are usually. Then we have a groove for an O-ring. You can put an O-ring there to make it sit more tightly in the outer barrel, but I noticed that the outer barrel is milled quite closely to match the size of the barrel, so there is not a whole lot of wobble between the barrels like in most guns. Then the hop-up chamber, pretty standard, nothing too amazing, although it has this place for the screw that it actually screws itself to the gearbox itself. That's not in very much any other stock hop-up unit. That is a design copied from the ProWin aluminum hop-up chambers. Then so now I'm gonna open the gearbox and see what's it's eaten. It seems that the spring guide doesn't have a hole in the rear. Whoa, the spring is really short here. This is one of the shortest springs I have seen here in EG. I guess it's alright. I'm not sure how much this gun is chronoing, but I would guess somewhere in the 400 FPS range. Then we have a spring guide. It has a steel base and then a plastic shaft that is rotational, and then we have bearings. I'm gonna check how deep the steel part goes in the. Yeah, it seems that the steel continues all the way up here, so it is a strong spring guide. No need to replace it. So far pretty standard parts, other than the mushroom shaped silent or so-called silent piston head. Then we have tappet plate made of polyacetal or polyester, or whatever is the right pronunciation. That's how we Finns pronounce it, polyacetal. Or other name is POM or polyoxymethylene. Seems quite solid. Nothing too special there. Then we have a plastic nozzle and a cylinder head. No O-ring, although the fit is quite decent. No, not much wobble, so not a whole lot of air escaping there, so not a problem there. I guess there's some potential for upgrading there. and these seem to be made of nylon. It's a nice material. It can handle lubricants really well. It doesn't become brittle like polycarbonate, so I would just suggest that these will last nice and long. No problems there. Brass cylinder, nothing too special like any other. Then the piston is really interesting. It looks a lot like the GMP stock piston, but there is some differences here. The material is same though, or at least the same material group. It's in fact, yeah, it's polyacetal. It's the design. Teeth seem to be shaped really nicely. Then we have the release tooth with 2 extra tooth, or so it's a 3 steel tooth rack. Then we have some lighting going on here. That's really cool. Good thing to have. And the rail design is quite interesting. It's actually makes sense in a way, or the most of the load is carried by this lower rail here, since the sector gear is sort of pushing the piston up a little bit, so the load is mostly on this lower part of the rail. Then the piston head, it has rubberized front here. And let's see, what is the O-ring is quite soft. Now I'm gonna check if the piston head O-ring groove has any mode lines. So mode lines typically they have an impact on the air seal. There's a small one there. I don't know if I can film that. That's not gonna cause anything big issues, but I don't think I can make it show, but it's like there. You can see that line that basically causes a small air leak, but it's a, you know, not a big deal. The O-ring size seems to be perfect, pretty much. It's like some friction, but not like overly much. Seems nice. Now let's check the compression really quick before getting into the gears. Let's do it the proper way. So holding them like this, you can check the compression is nice. There's just a little leak. I think it's from the nozzle. So let's check how it's sealing without the nozzle. No, there's still some leak. I wonder where that's from. It could be from in between the brass nozzle and the plastic, or then it's from this gap here. But I will check that later or fix it. Just a small leak, so it has really not much an effect on the performance. But I'm just showing everything here, so in as good detail as I can. So then we have the gears, nice and hefty looking gears. It has the marking X, so These are basically the same gear as you get in D-Boys, or pretty close to being the same. Maybe these are a little bit thicker. It also has this delayer here. Then we have the bevel gear. Yeah, these look a lot like the D-Boys gears, which are not bad gears at all. A lot of this weird blue colored grease. Nothing too special there. These gears are sintered gears. That means that they're not cast or CNC'd. They are made of with powder metallurgy, which means that these gears are compressed from a steel powder that is then heated to very close to the melting point, and then the powder sort of fuses together or welds together, and it forms a solid piece. It's an easy way to make complex steel parts, but the material density is not 100%, so you can't get 100% of the strength of steel, but typically the sintered steel gears are yet quite strong, so it seems to have a little bit thicker teeth than the D-Boys. The D-Boys spur gear has a little bit thinner these spurs here. I will be reshimming this gun anyway, so I don't care if I lose some shims here. Let's check how tight is the bushing here. I typically or what you want is to have a bushing that is not too loose on the axle. Seems to be quite fine. These bearings look quite nice. The races are quite thick. Yeah, it's sort of weird that they have the bushings on the sector gear rather than the under the spur, because you typically want a bushing under the spur gear, because it's actually holding the most of the, or it has the biggest load spike in a way, because the teeth on the spur gear are on the other side of the shaft, so most of the load that it's carrying is carried by the bearing under it. But on a sector gear it's pretty much balanced, so the load is really well balanced on the opposite half bushings, but on a spur gear, like over 80% of its load is carried by this lower bearing, so that's why these typically fail first in a high FPS or high speed builds. So so just a hint there, but in a stock gun like this it doesn't really matter too much. So what next? Well, anti-revulsor latch, nothing too amazing. XYT, so it's basically like the D-Boys one, so it's nice. Nothing to worry about there. Let's check the pinion gear on the motor. It looks a lot like the A&K pinion gear, and the motor itself looks a lot like the Chinese high torque motors. It has the blue end bell, so I'm fairly confident that these are the same motors that come with the newer CYMA AKs and the A&K AEGs. But I guess I could be wrong, but it looks really similar. So let's get on the hop-up unit. the adjustment could be a little bit stiffer, so this can travel on its own a little bit. Well, that's an easy fix. Let's open it up. Let me get my tool here. So I will be R-hopping this barrel, so hopefully I will get some nice performance out of this. So here is the barrel, and the plastic clips get taken out, so now I can take out the barrel itself. Make sure to not rip the backing here. Oh, whatever. It wants to catch on the freaking side here. Come on. Here we go. Really nice looking backing here. Very R-hoppable hop chamber, or not chamber, hop window. Then there's the backing itself. Nothing too amazing, although it does have a wee nub. Matches the nozzle quite nicely here. I doubt there is much air leaking here. Then we can actually check how straight is the barrel. Seems to be pretty straight. So that's nice. Sometimes barrels of this length already have some slight curvage, but this one doesn't have, so that's nice. So nothing too special here. And some things that I forgot to mention here. The piston head doesn't have any bearings, so it just all I can see inside here is the screw. So it's a good way to keep the weight down. The piston assembly doesn't feel too heavy. And then the bushings on the bushings and the bearings in the gearbox shell. The fit is really nice. They're not wobbling around. They're actually fit properly, unlike in most gearboxes. So this is a really nice thing, because in many gearboxes you have very loose bearings on your shell, and that pretty much ruins the purpose of having bearings or bushings, because then the gearbox shell itself will act as the bearing, and I mean if it's loose, and because the material of the gearbox shells is a cast zinc alloy, they're not very hard, so the holes for the bushings enlarge, and then you don't have good meshing with your gears. So you always need to have your bushings tight in their places. So if their fit is not tight, then you can use glue, like super glue or Loctite or epoxy even. Different people prefer different glues. I like to use super glue, but it depends on if the fit is really loose, then you might want to use some epoxy, because for super glue to work it needs to have two surfaces very close together. So if you have a lot of space between the bushing hole and the bushing itself, then the bond will not be very strong. And in all cases you need to degrease and clean everything really well. Otherwise you're just wasting time. They will come loose and then you have to do it all over again. finish on the gearbox shell looks really nice. It's not like those totally unfinished Chinese shells. Finish is nice on both sides here. Doesn't matter too much, but the casting seems to be really nice, so that's a good thing. Then I'm gonna check how what is the gear distance is. The gear to gear distances seems to be quite nice. Not too much space between the teeth, so that means smooth sounding gearbox. Then I don't know how much or what else there is to mention about this. I will be installing a MOSFET in this gun, reshimming it and checking everything and making sure that everything works right, basically. And possibly I will post a shooting test with the R-Hub. I decided not to shoot a shooting test with the stock setup because, well, stock gun is a stock gun. They all perform pretty much the same, so I don't really think there's much point recording them. But all I really wanted to show is the internal parts and how's the gun overall. And I have to say that this is probably the nicest AK I have ever worked on. I have worked on the Real Swords 2, and they're pretty much on par with these, but for some reason I like these more. Or considering the price, these AKs are much. They have a lot more bang for the buck, to say it in that way. So I highly recommend people getting these AKs. These are really nice. They're really worth the extra $100 or whatever they cost, more than the Chinese ones. So if you're getting an AK, I really recommend looking into these E&L AKs. These are really cool, nice, well made, and they have a lot of upgrade potential too. So what else is there to say? Well, I think that's it for now. So see you again soon. Thanks for watching.